Thank you for coming today. I know it's warm out there, but it's nice in here, and we're glad you're here. I had the privilege of meeting Jillien Erdman over email. Today is the first time I've actually met her, but I've been very impressed with the way she does business and how seriously she takes this topic. Jillien is with Snowline Hospice. She's going to talk to us a little bit about how do we know if we're just aging normally or if maybe there's some dementia going on. Not only in our life, if we've got dementia, we may not know it, but those around us may know it. So, Jillien, please come. She's got a wonderful program and handouts. We appreciate you.
Not only for my work with people that have some cognitive impairments, but also as a fellow follower of Jesus. I'm going to be sort of wearing two hats as I present today because I might have my work and my job, but I also am somebody that the Lord has touched and changed my heart and blessed my life and given me some pretty inspiring words from the scripture where he says, the way that you love the least of these is the way that you love me. And when he said, we don't just say, oh, be fed and be clothed and be well to others who are in need. Instead, we are to step in and help and support. And when I was a child, I got to interact with my great-grandmother who had dementia, only briefly because she lived in Georgia, but then also interface with my grandmother. So in addition to those hats where, professionally I serve and support families and people with dementia, I'm a believer, and so I'm called by Christ to love well those who are struggling with their thinking or their bodies. But also as a fellow human being, having watched my ancestors and knowing that I have that genetic risk factor from seeing, two generations now go through dementia, I also come to you just as a human that wonders, is my brain gonna carry me through my life? Am I gonna do okay? Do I have something potentially going on under the surface that I don't even know about yet? So I kind of have three different ways to speak to you today, and I first want to just acknowledge that you all already did my survey that's up on the screen. If you haven't and you have a smartphone, you can scan that QR code, or there are paper versions on the table in the back. The way this works is there is a pre-survey and a post-survey. So I so appreciate your patience in completing those. My program, I work with Snowline. You've, I'm sure, seen the thrift stores and have heard of Snowline Hospice for many decades. We are now called Snowline Health because we have programs like mine that are entirely separate from hospice. My program serves people with cognitive impairments all the way from just the beginning of getting a diagnosis and wondering, where do I go from here? We provide education like this in the community, and we also provide one-on-one consulting or home visits or other ways to help support people. And we are especially interested in being connected with those that live alone, that might be struggling with their memory or thinking, to make sure that they can stay safe and stay in their own home as long as they want to. That's really, something we're trying to counterbalance, the push that's gone through the years that has said if somebody's not thinking well or having some memory loss that they need to be taken out of their home. We don't follow that. We follow really helping to identify safety risks and issues. So that's a little bit about my survey. For me personally, I met Jesus alone in my room as an 11-year-old and felt him wash over my life and change my heart. And I was the oldest of 9 children, and so I spent a long time supporting my little brothers and sisters and all their friends and helping my mom with homeschooling. So as an 18-year-old, I knew I wanted to serve others and make a difference in the world, and I knew I had always loved my elderly neighbors. and really connected. I loved old movies and classic novels and all sorts of, different things that made me feel almost more connected with those of older generations than my own peers. So that led me to start working with people that had dementia. I didn't know dementia was what was going to be the connection for me, but over the last few decades, I've just learned so much about being a human, actually, from watching people struggle with how they think or how they remember or day-to-day life, and watching people sometimes have a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear, and then seeing others that were full of peace and love and joy, even though things were coming at their brain. And it has really inspired me in my journey, in my walk with the Lord, to just grow as much as I can in the process. So as we move through, I'm not sure if the folks in the booth like me to say next slide, or if we, but that's kind of my credential. That's what brings me here today. As we do go through the topics we're going to be talking about, you've heard already what my heart is to come here, and we are just going to take a few categories of comparing normal aging with the changes that might happen when someone has dementia. We all tend to forget things from time to time, forget a word. I end up in the garage and I knew I came there for a purpose and I don't know why I came to the garage. So I go back to my bedroom and I stand there and I say, oh yes, that's what I needed, and then I go back, right? And we have these, we tend to affectionately refer to them as, senior moments. So we'll talk a little bit about those kind of things that might happen as our bodies change a little, our thinking changes a little throughout the decades of our life, and which of those to think of as to be expected, and which ones to start asking our doctors about. We're not going to be talking here about getting medical diagnoses or anything like that, but we are going to talk about being able to identify, maybe I'm a little tired, maybe I'm not having a good day, my brain's just really not staying on track, versus, oh, you know what, these might be some red flags I should really bring up with the doctor. We can go ahead and move forward. Our program is funded by the Administration of Community Living, which is a federal government branch that is really helping people to stay in the community and to get equipped and supported. So we are very grateful to their work, as well as the work of Alzheimer's San Diego and Orange County that started what they called a gatekeeper program. So all of yourselves could be thinking of yourselves as our delegates in the church and in your own communities and families for how to bring this information out to others. We can go ahead and move on. So I did already talk about our objectives. I'll be sharing a little bit about more about my program and how you might connect someone, or you might benefit yourselves from some of the services we offer. We'll move on with that. And I think I already did talk a little bit about that. So when we think about dementia, it's kind of a big name. You might have heard that word interchanged with Alzheimer's disease or Lewy body, or has anybody heard about a celebrity in the news lately that has been talking about, or a few political figures maybe? I know some people are rather quiet and everybody's wondering what's going on for them, and then other public figures will come out and be very open about their situation. One of those people is Bruce Willis. If any of you have seen anything on the news or read a magazine article, Bruce Willis has what's called frontotemporal dementia. So dementia is a syndrome, a collection of symptoms that kind of labels when the brain starts to fail in different ways. And then we have actual diseases. So this is kind of like, oh, I could have a cold, or I might have a sore throat and I might be sneezing and have aches and pains. Or I could have, let's say, I could be getting the chicken pox, where I could also start sneezing and feel aches and pains, but I have a different disease going on, so to speak. It's like that with dementia, where you have a collection of symptoms, and then you could have different actual diseases, like Alzheimer's or frontotemporal, that could be the disease that causes that. So these numbers are actually from the Alzheimer's Association, so they are more specific to Alzheimer's type of dementia. But if we calculate out all the numbers for El Dorado County of how many seniors and then percentages of people of certain ages, we have far over 4,000 actually people right here in our own community that are living with dementia. That's 1 out of 10 people over 65, and then that continues to grow. By the time you're 85, you actually have a 1 out of 3 chance of having an Alzheimer's type dementia, which is probably about 60 to 80% of the dementias out there are an Alzheimer's type. So in addition to those, that fact, it's also the 5th leading cause of death at this point for those that are 65 and older, and the majority of the people supporting those that are struggling with these afflictions are family and friends and neighbors and people in churches that love and care for others. So it's not always easy, and when somebody is forgetting things and when maybe their social way of interacting with others may or may not be what you would expect or what might be easy to interact with. That's when people like yourselves that are willing even to sit through a class like this and hear more about it and think about a rather scary topic, as all of us are kind of thinking about the process of living to the end of our lives. There can be different concerns and fears. When we're trusting in the Lord, we know where our end goal is. We know that that's going to be good. But for me at least, the process of getting there and wondering what's going to happen for my body and my mind can sometimes be a topic I might not want to think about, or I might not want to be reminded of by having somebody really close to me. And that, again, it's one of those things to be able to invite the Lord to support us in and to ask us how He's giving us His grace and His love to share with another person, whether it is having a phone call with somebody that might tell a story, the same story over and over, or, going and sitting at a table with senior nutrition with somebody that, might monopolize the conversation because they don't, have that social awareness because of a change happening in their brain, but being able to listen and show up for them. All of these things are ways to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And I so commend your church and all of you as a group for the efforts that you make and that you maintain. I actually have a piece of my interaction with your church. I actually have been for the last, 2019 actually, for 4 years now, I've been co-leading one of your small groups. We have a dementia caregiver support group that I've led now with 2 other of your church members, and it's just an amazing chance to get together with caregivers and help to support them and invite Jesus into that process. There's a lot of other support groups in the area, but none others that focus on the Lord and what He can do for us in the caregiving journey. We'll go ahead and move forward. So a lot of times when people hear Alzheimer's or dementia, we think of maybe some scary thoughts, maybe some, dear Jesus, please, keep that away from me and my loved ones. But there are some stereotypes that we want to address, and part of those are just looking at the fact that people can still enjoy life in a really meaningful way. There's going to be a free documentary shown at Vintage Grace this Saturday. I started passing around some flyers about this, but it's a beautiful documentary all about life and overcoming and bringing joy into the experience. Even if you don't know someone that's, closely touched by dementia, I would recommend either sharing that with others or considering attending it yourself. We do have people that can still live quite independently, even with dementia. They can still take care of themselves in a lot of ways. There are things, though, that as our memory degrades can lead to safety issues or, risks where we really want others checking in. One experience that I had was an individual in my neighborhood that I knew was living alone and older in life, and always the type of person that when I went out to do yard work and he heard the lawnmower going, he would always be out in the yard waving at me, coming over to chit chat and talk. And he'd been very friendly when I first moved into the neighborhood and let me borrow a lawnmower when I didn't have one yet, and it had been a good connection to have. But I realized after I had been living in my house about 2 years, gosh, I'm not seeing that neighbor anymore. Seriously, I've mowed the lawn twice now and he hasn't come out. What's happening? And through myself and then a roommate that I had at the time, one of us eventually, I think it was my roommate, actually saw the person on his driveway having fallen down. And we were able to, just start to realize hey, there's something going on here. This person's not as healthy as they were. They're not as strong. There's something going on for their health. So it was not a normally to be expected changes for aging. So I'll talk a little bit more about him as we go, but as we're moving forward, this is not just something that affects people in their older years. There are some people that get impacted by dementia even as early as their 40s or 50s. And it's not, like I already mentioned, just one disease. There's a whole bunch of diseases that can cause this syndrome. We'll go ahead and move forward. There is a video here that explains more about what happens in the brain. I'll step aside and let you hear that.
Alzheimer's is a slow, fatal disease of the brain affecting 1 in 10 people over the age of 65. No one is immune. The disease comes on gradually as 2 abnormal protein fragments called plaques and tangles accumulate in the brain and kill brain cells. They start here in the hippocampus, the part of the brain where memories are first formed. Over many years' time, the plaques and tangles slowly destroy the hippocampus, and it becomes harder and harder to form new memories. Simple recollections from a few hours or days ago that the rest of us might take for granted are just not there. After that, more plaques and tangles spread into different regions of the brain, killing cells and compromising function wherever they go. This spreading around is what causes the different stages of Alzheimer's. From the hippocampus, the disease spreads here to the region of the brain where language is processed. When that happens, it gets tougher and tougher to find the right word. Next, the disease creeps toward the front of the brain, where logical thought takes place. Very gradually, a person begins to lose the ability to solve problems, grasp concepts, and make plans. Next, the plaques and tangles invade the part of the brain where emotions are regulated. When this happens, the patient gradually loses control over moods and feelings. After that, the disease moves to where the brain makes sense of things it sees, hears, and smells. In this stage, Alzheimer's wreaks havoc on a person's senses and can spark hallucinations. Eventually, the plaques and tangles erase a person's oldest and most precious memories, which are stored here in the back of the brain. Near the end, the disease compromises a person's balance and coordination. And in the very last stage, it destroys the part of the brain that regulates breathing and the heart. The progression from mild forgetting to death is slow and steady, and takes place over an average of 8 to 10 years. It is relentless and, for now, incurable. Helping your family, friends, and neighbors to better understand Alzheimer's will reduce stigma, improve care, and even help the fight for a cure. Thanks for helping to do your part. Learn more at www.aboutalz.org.
So that video is a rather heavy trajectory, and that process won't happen for everybody who has dementia, and it's very individualized for each person, but that's kind of a generalized view. it makes us all super grateful that have Jesus with us, that, there are things we would really love for him to just cure and just wipe off the map. But we are also, I am very grateful and blessed to see God working within those kind of processes, both for those that love someone with dementia and for the person themselves that is experiencing some of those changes. I do have some slides here. That was the Alzheimer's type of a dementia. The slides up above at the top of your screen show different brain scans for people that have different kinds of dementia. The one on the far right is the control brain, or the healthy brain. And then it goes with a DLB, which is dementia with Lewy bodies, and then AD, which is Alzheimer's, and FTD, which is frontotemporal dementia. So you can see where there are the more dark black places on the brain to show where there can be changes and what can actually be happening in the brain of a person, with dementia. It is one of those invisible disabling conditions. It's not like we can see somebody in a wheelchair so we know they're not going to be able to go run up those stairs. It's a change that happens internally, and what we might see or hear from that person is, some differences in their personality, or some, maybe repeating or asking the same question, or forgetting appointments, or, certain things that become difficult for them and for people around them. But what we forget quite often is, what they're dealing with inside their own head, and how well they really are doing a lot of the time with what they've got, and those brain changes that are happening. The images toward the bottom are microscopic artistic renditions of what some of those plaques and tangles might look like in Alzheimer's, or the center one has a Lewy body, actually, for dementia with Lewy bodies. If any of you ever followed Robin Williams and the end of his life, he actually had dementia with Lewy bodies. And it was misdiagnosed, which that one is quite often because it's complicated diagnosis, where they, thought he had depression or some different things going on, and then it was actually the dementia with Lewy bodies that he decided he had no hope to be able to approach. But as heavy as that is, and as hard as it is to watch a little video like we just watched, the counterpoint to that is that joy and the Spirit of God working through a person is not limited by a brain disorder. That the Lord can still either reach people. Like I have an adopted uncle that's just a dear, dear person to me, and he hadn't been to church for decades, and he has quite advanced dementia. And last Christmas, I was like, why don't you just come to church with me for Christmas? And he loved it. And ever since then, he's been back to church with me. And with where he's at, it's, I have to just trust the Lord for what he's able to receive, but he loves the music, and he loves being with the people and the connections. And, those, life can still go on and have many beautiful, rich things. And I've, just even coming to support people, I've worked in nursing homes, and I've worked in memory care homes, and in, individual private homes. No matter where I am with a person, they always teach me something and bless me in some way when I'm there to maybe quote unquote, work for them. It's an amazing thing as humans, how our spirit and how the process of connecting and relating with others can be such a humongous blessing. So let's move on now. We'll go ahead and start talking about the different categories. Now that I've thoroughly laid out the bare bones of the scary parts of dementia, now we get to start looking at these symptoms that might come up for us as we're aging normally. So, of course, They say aging is not for the faint of heart. Growing old is not for the faint of heart. I know even in my 40s now, I'm already starting to oh man, oh gosh, I have to put the readers on. Why does my body have to change? Lord, I know you're doing something in this, but make it clear to me, please. So as our memory changes, we are going to have more difficulty with remembering names and words. You'll notice mostly it is, those person, place, and thing words that will escape us. Somebody's name, the name of a town. It's probably not going to be words that are action words where we're not really going to usually forget to say sit or run. It's going to be more, hey, Bob, Sue, Jane, whatever. That could happen at any time in life. We also might find that, the longer we live, the more experience, the more knowledge, the more full our brain becomes. And also, as our bodies change a little bit, the more energy it takes to just get through all the things that modern life tends to require of us. So our brains can get distracted. We cannot pay attention sometimes. We might forget things or misplace things. It can be frustrating, but it is to be expected. We only remember what we pay attention to, and we only can pay attention to the things that we take in and sense. I was driving with one of my daughter's friends, and she was giving me directions back to her house. I was dropping her off after a birthday party, and she's like, "Are you just going to go around the block?" And I was like, I had driven right by her house and was just driving along. She's like, "Yeah, I told you that. I told you to turn there." And I was like, oh man, I had gotten caught up in my head thinking about something else or distracted by something I saw. So I didn't even hear her, or I didn't register that that's what she was saying. It happens. It does happen. We can only really put a memory together when we've fully taken in the information and our brain has said, blink, this is important. It's like we have a very efficient, supercomputer going on in our heads. And that computer tries to run as efficiently as possible. So it tries to limit distractions and interference from all of the things coming at us day in and day out. So it has this process of filtering information where it says what you ate for breakfast, same thing you've eaten for 5 years, and 3 days out of the week, not important. Don't even think about it again. Eat the food and move on for your day. It doesn't clutter your brain up with maybe minutia of experiences that don't really become pertinent to you. But this morning when I was doing my breakfast routine, I'm also getting packed for a camping trip, and I'm keeping in my head and on a bunch of lists what I need to pack. And I grabbed a few things in my breakfast routine that I also put into the camping bin. And that, my brain said, oops, better remember, you did this part, but you still got that other part that needs to be done. So my brain's able to pick out the things that are important and retain those. And the fascinating thing about our memory is, I always used to think that I just had this little video camera in my head just recording all the things I needed to remember and then just ready to play it back, just like a little TV screen playing back the memory. But that's actually not how our memory works. Our brain actually has this tremendously complex, to the billions of degrees of different neurons, of a network that when we are actually remembering something, it has all these different systems that remember different things in different ways for different reasons. And every time we remember something, our brain actually codes it out to different parts of our brain and logs the data of the memory. And then when we go to remember it, every single time we remember something, our brain has to put the memory back together again when we remember it. So that's why it, especially if you have loved ones and or not so endearing peer people, either way, that you experience things with, and you remember it one way and they remember it very differently. It's because as our brain puts the memory back together, it's influenced by what we're feeling in the moment, what were other things we're thinking about. That's actually pretty normal. And just as our brains are dynamic and we're built by God to be able to use our intuition and how the Spirit guides us and be able to kind of filter what we see and how we retain things. That's a system built by God, but also it can be co-opted a little bit by the enemy of our soul that wants to, distract us and, keep us caught up in other thoughts. So that's part of being human. And can be difficult when our memories don't come through and we forget about something. But one good thing to remember is if you're aware you're forgetting something, it's actually a good sign, because when your memory is really something to worry about is when you don't remember that you're forgetting something. And somebody else might say, wait, we talked about this, we decided this, or hey, we had this appointment, and they bring it up, and the person might have no recollection of that having happened. So what can happen in that process for our brain of taking up information, storing it, coding it, and actually it's part of when we sleep, our brain actually does this process of kind of condensing the experiences of the day and storing them out into our retention system. So if that's not working well, or there can be any number of hiccups that can happen. But when you're going to be a little bit more concerned about your memory is when other people are reminding you of things and you don't have any recollection that it happened. So that could be like, with my daughter's friend, where I just didn't hear it. I didn't, take it in to begin with. But there can also be a system where, I talked about the memory getting coded. Well, you might think about that coding kind of like a file folder, in your filing cabinet where you file the different pieces of information. Well, what happens when you want to be, start to be concerned is that instead of those files being there where you can oh man, what was that? What was I supposed to do? Yes, I was going to meet Mary for some, oh, that's right. You can, kind of get back to, a memory that you might have forgotten initially or, lost track of. Because you're able to get to that file folder, get the information you need. But when we're starting to be concerned with dementia coming in, it's almost like those file folders, some of them start to become little shredders. And it's like we nod, we say, oh yeah, let's do that. Or we, agree if we are the person that has some dementia. And we feel like we're filing it into the folder, just like we always have, without realizing that our brain has that little where it's not retaining and not able to record that information. But the brain also protects itself very well. The idea that I'm lost in not remembering what's happening around me and what has been happening for me is something that would be terrifying and horrible if the brain was really aware of it. And sometimes there is some of that awareness, but for the most part, and again, I do think God kind of designed it this way, that, we have this sense that we have to depend on what is coming out of our brain. If I can't trust my own brain, I'll be so lost, I wouldn't know what to do. So there's a sense for people when they're are losing their memories or their ability to make new memories, that instead of knowing that there's a vacuum there for what they couldn't make memories of, their brain just goes back to the last things they can remember in that certain thing. So the last time I took a shower, I know it was last night, but if I'm no longer able to record memories, I could remember a shower very clearly, and it could have been 2 years ago or 20 years ago, but my brain doesn't know that because it can't remember any shower since then. So it has a clear memory of a shower, but my brain isn't able to track that. So those are the kind of red flag areas when it comes to memory. There's also, of course, the issue of, One thing I know about my brain is I'm horrible with directions and space. I'm somebody that's all about emotions and thoughts and interacting with people, and so I'll get on the highway going the wrong way all the time, but I usually get it by the next exit. I know how to bring myself together. I was following a pilot car where there was road work on Pleasant Valley Road the other day, and I was just so serious. I'm watching that pilot car follow him, and I drove right by my turn and had to wait in line for to get the next pilot car coming back. So I know that about me. This has always been my brain, unfortunately, with a lack of spatial awareness. But when dementia comes into the picture, the brain's ability to keep track of where we are in space, the location of where I am could be impaired. So somebody that, I could get lost on my way somewhere, but I could know that I'm lost. There's been people that I've known that, they feel like they're not even home when they're in their own house that they've lived in for decades because their brain is no longer able to keep track of, where that is. And that would be further, into a really, big step into red flaghood. But, trying to walk into a house that's not yours because you feel like it is, those are definite issues. And then another thing is, I might say garlic when I really mean ginger. I might mix up words, but if I forgot what a hairbrush was, what to do with a hairbrush, then that's definitely a red flag. That's a problem. Labels, no big deal. The function of something, that's something we want to be concerned about if people struggle with that. So as we move forward, we've got some thinking changes. We already talked about our brains getting very full with data and learning and knowledge and memories as we age, and so our thinking might be a little slower than it was when we were younger. It might take us longer to learn something because the brain has to sort through that much more information, because again, that efficient brain that we have, as we're thinking, it has to tag and navigate and sort information with the other things that are associated with it for our brain. It's a very complex way that we remember things and that we problem solve and make decisions and all of that. So it's normal as we age to maybe have our attention span and our ability to focus when there's a lot of distractions or interruptions or whatever. Our patience might kind of be more strained. But what some of the things we want to be concerned about for dementia would be when, maybe a change in ability to read or write something, or when somebody always had a really, sort of good head on their shoulders when it came to making money decisions or getting bills paid, or being able to, not take a lot of risks in their life, and maybe all of a sudden they're starting to take risks in an uncharacteristic fashion. Those are things we want to talk to the doctor about. And then as we go forward with other areas, we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. In our physical body, we all know that our bodies change as we age. That is to be expected. We might have some vision, some hearing, other sensory issues that could change for us, and our strength and flexibility will, adapt much more to how well we're using our body or how, other health issues that we have. But if we have changes where, maybe we can't see peripheral vision anymore, or we're having issues with our balance and, maybe tripping a lot more, or having, some falls, or the ability to pay attention to something I'm hearing when there's, different visual things happening, or, being able to focus in on one sense instead of being overwhelmed and frustrated by, a lot of different senses. Those are, again, some differences that can come up in the physical realm of things. After that, we have behavioral changes that can come up. as we're aging, our behavior doesn't usually change. It actually, especially for those of us following Christ, we'll hope will only continue to be refining as he's working through us and in us. And our behavior is that of, the personality and the believing person that we are. But when we have dementia coming into the picture, there can be some pretty significant mood or personality changes, because the brain has to do so much for us as we're, living life and dealing with the things coming at us and the things that we have to deal with. That when somebody's starting to really withdraw socially, they're not coming to church, they're not showing up at the meetings they always came to, or the meals they used to attend. If there's, kind of things piling up around the house that they're just not getting to, we can all have a little bit of a lack of initiative, but, when it's really a significant, issue where, that neighbor I mentioned to you, once we did, go into his house and see, that it was, really just, piling with debris and filth and dust, and there was, things deteriorating in the home, and this person didn't really have a concept of that. And, one day I went in to bring him some groceries because he couldn't drive anymore, and he couldn't get himself physically, up and down the stairs to his house even. So I brought him groceries one day, and that day he couldn't even get out of his chair, his recliner. He was trying to get up, and he was struggling, and he's about 300 pounds, so I couldn't help him up. And so I was like, okay, I think we need to call for help. We need to call 911 or another neighbor or something. There's a guy that lived across the street that it was really helpful. And this person he holds up his remote control, because I was looking for the phone. I'm like, can you tell me where your phone is? Can you tell me what it looks like? Because there was debris and garbage, everywhere. And he's, here, use this. And it's actually his remote control. I'm like, okay, I'm not calling a neighbor. I'm calling 911. This is definitely an issue. And we were able to get him some medical care. And he, the one thing is you can have red flags like that and signs, but we'll go ahead and move forward. But and he wasn't aware he had a problem. He wasn't aware there was something going on, but he actually had a really severe vitamin deficiency that was impacting his thinking and causing his brain to actually swell a little bit. And so getting him over to the hospital and getting him the medical treatment he needed was actually able to stabilize, and it didn't turn out that he had an Alzheimer's type of a progressive situation going on. So it is just really important to just be willing to ask the doctor and encourage others that you love, to talk to things about their doctor, talk to these kind of things with their doctor. Unfortunately, though, sometimes, he was, this person was really, not aware. When I went to visit him in the hospital the first time, he thought he was in Australia, and he was telling me about, a whole, I think it was something he might have seen on TV. And so, with what was going on for his brain, he really had a more extreme case. But it can be a lot harder for people to try to follow directions and get themselves the help that they need. And also, there can be little things that our brains do for us. Like, for instance, if I walk into the store and I've picked up an item that I know I want to buy, I have to be able to remember that I haven't gone to the register yet and paid for that item before I walk out the door. Well, if somebody's memories are mixing up on them, they might remember last time they were at the store and they rang out and talked to the nice cashier, and they might not make the connection. They haven't paid for that item and try to walk out with it. It doesn't mean they're trying to shoplift. It doesn't mean they have any illegal intentions. It's just we need our memories for that kind of an issue. So as we move forward, when we are wanting to support our neighbors, our friends, our family members even, we have to watch out for, what the safety issues are. We don't want to have a knee-jerk response that says, hey, you're forgetting more things, we have to take away your life from you, and anything like that. But as we move on to the next slide, we just have, different things that we want to think about as we're approaching someone. And when they're struggling on how well they can manage life and figure things out, we want to be as supportive as possible. And, this has to do with, some tricks that really help all brains at all times, but when I'm trying to help someone and interact with them, if they have some confusion going on, I don't want to necessarily maybe stand face to face, especially if they're struggling or anxious or maybe upset about something. I want to kind of come to the side when I'm talking to that person. So I have a supportive presence. You might notice with your loved ones, if you ever have a disagreement, that sometimes it's easier to figure that disagreement out when you're driving in the car together or walking together, where you're side to side. Again, there's this human inclination that can be like, you're the problem, and you're like, no, you're the problem. We can do that sometimes with each other, but instead, if we're like, we're together and there's a problem out here, even with our body position, we can help support that for the other person and for ourselves, to be like, I'm not here to fix this person, change this person, tell this person that they're wrong. I'm here to support them. And it is important to move in a more slow, calm, reassuring manner. And if we try to give instructions to someone that's feeling overwhelmed or maybe feeling a little bit lost, we do want to make sure we're sticking to just one step at a time and keeping that simple, and knowing that we might repeat ourselves a few times, and that we do that because Christ loves us, and he said he's never going to leave us or forsake us. He's always going to be there for us. He's going to be the same yesterday, today, and forever. And through that strength that he gives, we can then also support each other and connect with each other and have that patience. And it can be hard because we might think, oh, this person is confused about something and they're upset because they're confused. So I just need to straighten them out and give them the truth of the facts. Maybe somebody, in a more advanced situation might be looking for their baby, and you're like, all right, I can tell that you must have grown children now and probably not a baby. Maybe you even know a grown child. And so they're really worried, and you think, oh, to be loving and compassionate, I need to tell them, no, your children are actually now grandparents. They're not babies anymore. You don't have to worry about them. Well, it's not actually going to make sense to that person because their mind, remember the shredder and the lack of memories in between now and then, their brain is back in the place where it's real, that they do have a baby. And not only that, when you have a child that you're responsible for, it really is a special thing. You belong. You have love. You have a purpose when you have that child. So when somebody kind of tries to rip that away by saying, no, your child grew up, even though you can't remember anything about it right now, that's actually really not the most compassionate way to interact with the person. So instead, we don't want to, make up some story or, confuse them anymore. But in the instance of somebody in that situation, I'm looking for my child, being able to, say, tell me more. Tell me about your child. That's scary. It's really scary to be missing a child. I bet your daughter is beautiful, and just getting them talking about what they're worried about and what their stresses are, knowing that somebody cares and will listen. It isn't just about to tell them they're wrong, can make such a difference. When we respond to their feelings, I can hear that this is really hard for you. This is so tough. Should we walk? Let's take a walk and see what we can find. I'm not affirming and I'm not denying that there's a lost child, but I'm caring about her. And then as we can maybe get some movement of the body, it can bring down that anxiety. Maybe we can pray together. Let's pray. Jesus knows everything, doesn't he? Being able to pray through their anxieties and allow the Spirit of the Lord is there and can go beyond brains. And inviting the Lord to minister to the person can be so powerful as we're helping to support them. So I've, of course, talked a lot, and I'm really at the end of our time together. I'm going to have you just scan through to the next slide really quick. These are the risks that we want to watch out for and we want to equip people for, but ultimately there are hours upon hours upon hours of things that I could share and ways that I could help equip you. What I would just like to encourage you about is, if you do know someone, if you love someone, or if you're a little concerned about somebody in your life, be with them. Be with them as much as you can, and hear what's going on for them, hear how they're interacting with their doctor or not interacting with their doctor, and just encourage them, pray with them. And thank you for just continuing to be the body of Christ and to, care about learning more about this topic instead of being scared away by it. Because, there's so much to life and the complexities of being a human and the power of God that can be in every situation that we experience that is worth it to do it together and to have others that we know care and that humility that says, I'm not going to have all the answers and I'm not going to know what to do in every situation, but each and every person is valuable enough to have others to be with them in their journey, wherever that journey might go. So thank you all so much. I did run us out of any time as a group for questions, but I will be back at the table there, and I have a number of other classes that we're going to be holding over the next few months. If you have more interest in learning more on this topic or encouraging somebody that you know to attend one of our classes, please do come back and see me at the table and let me know your questions and thoughts. And thank you so much for your time. Yep. If you do have your pre-survey, I would love to grab that, but it's not mandatory, but it would help so much if you would be willing to do an after survey as we're heading over for cake. I do have, some of those I think that have been passed around. If you wouldn't mind filling those out and getting them back to the table, it helps with our funding tremendously to have that data. Yes. Yes, we do have a QR code. If you could go back one slide to the QR code, I have it also on the back table. There you go. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah.